Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you. Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit less a funny story and more just a plea. Please, if you are coming on a ghost tour, pay a good bit of attention to what tour you're booking. So tonight I had these two guests who were very lovely, very sweet young women, and they were the only people on the tour. And we got weird vibes from the beginning. Like the second I started, I was like, something's wrong here. Don't seem as happy as possible. And like when we were walking to the first stop, they mentioned like, oh yeah, we're really excited to learn all about the history of New Orleans, and we're really into history. And I was like, okay, well you do know that this is the true crime tour, right? Like, this one features about half historical stories and half recent stories. And she was like, oh, well, I guess that's okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, they did not read the description. And like, at the end of every single stop that I did not directly mention a ghost, they'd ask me about like, and is this place haunted? And the thing is, this is the true crime tour. We don't necessarily talk about ghosts on all these stops. Like, yeah, some of them have ghosts. Some of them don't. And I would give them the information I had about the paranormal stuff, and once I realized that they wanted that, I went out of my way to include more of it. Just like once I realized they were interested in history, I went out of my way to include more random bits of history, and like I actually did an additional stop that was just history. And I was trying my best, but like clearly they were not happy, and like they looked less and less engaged as the tour went on, which is always difficult when there are only two guests. And after the last stop, we happened to be heading back in the same direction, and usually when this happens, my guests seem rather happy about this, because like, yeah, most guests assume that the tour guide is going to drop them off where we started, and that's not always the case. So quite often we walk guests back at least halfway to the starting location as a way of being like, okay, let's get you back somewhere like you know. And when I mentioned I was going the same direction as them, these girls, like, both their faces fell, and it was very clear that they were like, oh, how nice. We get to spend more time with the tour guide. And so, like, I thought about, like, making an excuse and hovering back, but I thought it'd be very, very obvious what I was doing. So I was like, okay, it's a block before I get to my car. Like, it's fine. I'm not going to walk them any further than that. But as we were walking back, one of the girls mentioned in passing, like, oh, yeah, so we were just thinking that this was a little bit more, we were expecting more of just like a spooky ghost tour. And I had to be like, sweetheart, you signed up for the killers and thrillers. It's the violent true crime tour. And she was a little bit like, oh, well, yeah, but we were hoping for more history. And the history you included was, a lot of it was about slavery. And I had to fight so hard not to just be like, sweetheart, it's New Orleans. A lot of our history is enslavement. Like, there's not much else I can talk about here, especially when we're talking about the 1800s. And to not talk about it feels an awful lot like whitewashing history. But of course, I did not say that. What I did say was, well, this is a debate that a lot of tour guides are having right now about how much should we do talking about enslavement and stuff, because there is a certain level that sort of feels like, you're capitalizing on other people's pain, but also this is edutainment. We are here to teach, and to not talk about such a major topic feels an awful lot like whitewashing. I did not quite phrase it that way, but, I made the point that, like, yeah, we sort of do have to talk about this. And she clearly was not happy with that answer, but luckily at that point I was at my car, so I just sort of like waved them on. I was like, have a nice night. But yeah, so overall, please, if you're coming on a tour, pay at least enough attention to know which tour you're signing up for. If you want spooky ghost stories and myths, go on the tours that advertise themselves as spooky ghost stories. If you want pure history, go on a history tour. If you want to talk about vampires, go on a vampire tour. And if you do find yourself on the wrong tour, and you happen to be the only people on the tour, Just directly tell your guide what you want, and chances are they're gonna be able to at least slightly change the tour to match your expectations. I could have very easily given them the Ghost of New Orleans tour if I knew that's what they wanted. But they never told me that's what they expected until after the tour was over. So, I don't know, man. Just know what you're buying before you buy it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below.